And good morning, and we are back here, and Scott Braddock is on line one. I hope that's you. Scott,
It's me.
are you there?
Am I on one?
You're on one, sir.
Did you push the button to put me in program? Am I on
You
the
are
air?
you are
Get
on
that?
you're on the air, live
All
and in
right.
color.
All right. Hello, Lubbock. Hello, everyone.
So, are you down in Crazy Town today, down in Austin?
I'm back in Austin, but it's been quite a week. I was in Houston for a speaking event. I was in Dallas yesterday for the Dallas Citizens Council annual meeting. They had James Mattis, former Secretary of Defense, on stage in Dallas. Very interesting speech. He talked about his experience in the military. One thing that he declined to talk about was whether he disagreed with President Trump on any of his policies, particularly what the president has done in Syria, which, of course, everyone understood from news reports previously that Mattis was not happy with what President Trump had done there, but he did tell the crowd in North Texas that, look, as a lifelong soldier and as somebody who values the fact that our troops do serve under this president until that president's not in office anymore, that you don't want to be, as a former military person, disagreeing with their commander-in-chief, because the law says they do still have to obey the commander-in-chief, and you don't want the guys in the field, the men and women in the field, thinking that, oh, look, there's this very well-respected former general or retired general saying, hey, I don't agree with the president. You don't want them having that debate out there.
Well,
so
you know
it's
what?
a very interesting presentation.
I respect that in him a lot.
Yeah.
I'll bet he's an interesting person. Did he tell you war stories?
He told some war stories. He talked about sort of the details of the way that when he was commanding forces in Afghanistan, the way that Osama bin Laden got away from them. Remember, originally, they thought, all of the intelligence agencies thought, and it seemed that they were correct, that Osama bin Laden was in one of two canyons there, in between some mountains, and Mattis had them all lined up and ready to go, but then there was sort of as I understood it, there was sort of a miscommunication between him and some of the commanders in the field, and they just didn't go in and get him. And, of course, later in President Obama's administration is when they ended up getting him in Pakistan.
Yeah, exactly.
Interesting stuff. Mm-hmm.
Well, let's see. You said President
But
Trump's...
now I'm back here in Austin. So.
Yeah, you said President Trump's fundraising is surging as the Democrats push forward with impeachment. Is that the reason that people are donating to Trump in Texas?
It has to be among the reasons, and I would think one of the primary reasons. The fact is that in September, after Democrats started the impeachment inquiry, you remember that Nancy Pelosi came out and said that the committees are going to start working on that. President Trump had his best fundraising in Texas since he took office at that time. He pulled in more than $1.3 million for September, which is more than double the amount of money he raised the previous month. And the Houston Chronicle reporting this morning that with tens of thousands more raised in Dallas and Fort Worth last month during that rally and fundraiser that has yet to be reported, he's raised now about 75% as much in Texas for his reelection as he did in his entire 2016 campaign. I think what we're seeing in this impeachment, just from a political standpoint, without getting into all the legalities of it, I'm sure that it'll be argued, up one side and down the other. But for the political reality, it really does just put people in their partisan corners. I mean, even more than we've seen previously, even more than with previous impeachments. This is very much down the line, Republican and Democrats, and those Republicans supporting the president, and the Democrats even more against the president maybe than we've seen before. But I do think it's interesting that the Democrats are sort of hitting the gas on this with Pelosi just yesterday saying that her chairmen are now being asked to go ahead and draft those articles of impeachment, and they could be voting on all of this very soon in the coming days. Seems like they want to go ahead and have the record vote on this and move it on through so that, at least from a political standpoint, the campaign can be partly about this, but not all about this. We'll see.
Yeah. I kind of have this theory, well, not so much a theory. I think it was proven right in 2016 that Trump has a tremendous amount of stealth support out there that we don't see, and this kind of confirms that. It seems. The fundraiser. Raising the funds. That's a pretty positive thing for him.
raising money is good, but of course, the dollars don't necessarily translate to votes. We'll find out, but I do think the energy is certainly coming up on the Republican side as far as defending the president. I mean, you don't see any of. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we got Chad with us this morning. I think.
Oh, hey, Chad.
He's
morning.
Hey, Scott, what's going on?
Hey, we're just talking impeachment.
I'm going to slide in here like Chris Collinsworth does on NBC.
There he is, moving on in.
That's right. Yesterday, and this is, it makes headlines just because it's Beto O'Rourke, but Beto O'Rourke again last night, saying that he's definitely, seriously, guys, not running. And I thought it was interesting, Scott. There's another headline out, maybe from Politico, not sure if you've seen it today, that Democrats are now, national Democrats, are now focusing on Bullock up in, Montana, to get him to run for that Senate seat, and they're over Beto. The national Democrats are, they're completely over Beto O'Rourke now.
Oh, they are?
Yeah, they're done with him.
Well, okay.
Which is weird because Bullock...
he was their man.
Well, but Bullock is more of at least as when he was running for president, was running much more moderate than Beto O'Rourke was.
Yeah, and I'm not sure that the question so much about their stances ideologically. I just think it's that the national Democrats are looking at which Democrats can win some of these races and which are actually potentially interested. I mean, at some point you have to say, all right, how many times does O'Rourke have to say he's not running until we actually believe him? And, no matter what his positions were on the campaign trail, whether he was more liberal than he certainly was during the Senate race last year, as we've talked about many times, he just has really indicated that he is really not interested in this. So maybe the fact that they're moving, it's like a bad breakup. They're finally over him. They're moving on and going on to the next thing. It's interesting for a variety of reasons, and I think that the real interesting thing about what you just said is that, look, you've got an opportunity in both Montana and Texas to have Democrats win in states that President Trump carried last time, and of course is probably going to carry again this time around in 2020. Look, in Montana and in Texas now, you have the loss of one-punch straight-ticket voting, which is very important. A lot of the Republican consultants I talk to, a lot of the political professionals, will say that once we don't have straight-ticket voting in Texas anymore, this state will vote more like a Mountain West state than like a southern state. And if you look at Montana, it's the perfect example where you had the senator there who was up for re-election the last time around, John Tester. He was able to win that seat statewide in Montana, even though it's a state that President Trump carried by about 30 points, and President Trump went to that state repeatedly to campaign against that senator. And the Democrats still won anyway.
Yeah.
So once you don't have that and this is a real interesting test. We've talked a lot about it, Chad. Once you don't have that anymore, the candidates really have to stand on their own merit, and it's really not as much about anymore whether they are Republicans or Democrats, and has to do with whether the voters identify with that person, whether they like that person, and whether they even go out of their way to vote in that specific race. So it does make a huge difference.
Scott, with kind of on the national scene, Kamala Harris dropping out, and there are all these reports, how Kamala Harris can still be effective. Let's kind of localize that here, or statewide it for Beto O'Rourke. Beto's in some areas of the state, he's going to be real toxic, and you probably, if you're a Democrat, you may not want to be anywhere near Beto O'Rourke.
Right.
But other Democrats are going to want to be near O'Rourke. What type of influence do you think he's going to try to have in upcoming elections, either for the Texas House, Texas Senate, or other races?
Great point, Chad. And it looks like O'Rourke has been more interested in having some influence in those Texas House races, right? He did some block walking for example, a Democratic candidate down in Fort Bend County in the Houston area. He's almost, to the point of, to your point about him being toxic in some places, it's almost the political photo negative of President Trump and his political profile right now, where the two things can be true at once, is that the president can carry the state by, as much as 9 points or maybe even more. We know that his campaign would like to do better than they did last time. But the places that President Trump would be toxic, like some of those suburban counties where the voters seem to be moving away from him in places like Fort Bend County, Collin County, Denton County, Williamson County, et cetera. Those are the places where O'Rourke did better, and that Democrats were coming up in 2018. So, the fact that O'Rourke wouldn't be running statewide, he might actually be able to be more effective as somebody who goes into some of those places and helps some of those Democrats get across the finish line in places where they either did, win last time around or where they almost won last time around. And the turnout will no doubt be better than it was in 2018 when we had, 8.4 million people vote in an off-year election. How many people will vote in the next one in 2020? Who knows? But we could be seeing, turnout as high as 13 or 14 million.
Hey, well, we're up against the clock. Mm-hmm. So, Scott, always good to have you in on our little Friday visit about Texas politics. And
nice to mix it up with you and Chad today.
All right. That's Scott Braddock, the editor of the quorumreport.com.
Yeah.
We'll be back
Good
to
stuff.
close out a week of Dave and Matt in the morning with Chad after this.